From a traumatized kid in the 1950s bashing in a scientist's head with a rock to that same kid getting decapitated by Joyce Byers wielding an axe, here is every single death in Stranger Things 5. Let's start right at the beginning, in episode 1. While the human body count in the first episode is thankfully low compared to what comes later, there is a death that honestly hit me harder than I expected. I am talking about Jake. Yes, Jake the snake. I know it's a reptile, but you have to hear me out on this one because it matters. Dustin Henderson has been through the absolute ringer. He lost Eddie Munson in the most traumatic way possible. He is traumatized, and he is trying to find some semblance of normalcy or control in a world that has gone completely off the rails. He rescues the snake, Jake, from the science lab at school. He calls it a field trip. And you can see that this little creature is his new dart, but without the terrifying demodog evolution that eats cats. It is just a pet, a small connection to the natural world that he is trying to save. But then we have Andy. Andy is the new antagonist at Hawkins High, this jock who represents the absolute worst of mundane human cruelty. When Dustin goes to Eddie's grave to clean off that horrific vandalism, hoping for a moment of peace and connection with his fallen friend, he finds pieces of Jake, chopped up, lying on the ground below Eddie's defaced headstone. It is brutal. It is visceral. Moving right along into the heavier action, we have to talk about the military presence because the body count for the US Army in these first 4 episodes is absolutely astronomical. We get that intense sequence involving the supply convoy and Hopper's infiltration. We know Hopper has been doing these crawls into the Upside Down to do recon, which sounds brave until you see it and realize exactly why it is a suicide mission every single time. He infiltrates that supply convoy hiding in the transport truck, and things go south so fast. We are watching the convoy move through the Upside Down. The atmosphere is thick with spores and red lightning, and suddenly a Demogorgon just leaps out of the fog. It is chaos. The creature kills 2 soldiers almost immediately upon landing, just tearing through them like they are made of paper. Then it lands on the roof of the transport truck, the very one Hopper is hiding in, and smashes right through the metal cab. The driver of that truck didn't stand a chance. We see the roof cave in, and the driver is killed instantly. It is a terrifying way to go. Then we have the situation at the billboard in the Upside Down. This is where we see Lieutenant Colonel Sullivan and his team trying to secure the area, and they are just completely out of their depth. They stop at Checkpoint H for Hercules, and Sullivan steps out to do recon, which is basically just code for taking a leak against the landscape of hell. One of his soldiers decides to relieve himself near the vine wall. Hopper is hiding behind that billboard with 11, and he sees the soldier. The soldier notices a knife in the vines, which tips him off that they aren't alone. But before he can really process it or raise a proper alarm, Sullivan calls in the Hedgehog. That is that massive sonic cannon device mounted on the Humvee, designed specifically to incapacitate 11. As soon as they turn that sonic cannon toward the wall, 11 starts screaming in agony because those sound waves are her kryptonite. Hopper knows he has to act, and he has to act now or they are both dead. So he goes into full survivalist Rambo mode. He grabs those grenades from his bag, pulls the pins with a grim look of determination, and throws them out from behind the billboard. The explosion is massive. We see the fireball blast the soldiers back, sending bodies flying through the air. It is hard to get an exact head count in the explosion itself because of the chaos and the smoke, but that grenade blast definitely took out a cluster of Sullivan's men. It was a brutal, necessary move to silence that cannon. Hopper shoots and destroys the Hedgehog device right after, and once that device is down, 11 regains her focus. We see her use her powers to take out the remaining soldiers who survived the initial blast, and she does not hesitate. And listen, before we get to the next batch of bodies, do me a favor and obliterate that like button with the same intensity Hopper just used on those grenades. Unlike those soldiers, it'll actually survive the impact. Episode 4 is where the bodies really start piling up in a way that feels like a finale. There is a specific soldier whose neck gets snapped by 11 using her telekinetic powers. She throws him over the tower like a rag doll. It is a shocking moment because we usually see Elle using her powers for defense or restraint. Even though she is struggling with her powers and the dampening effects of the environment, she is still lethal when she needs to be. Then there is the tragic, messy case of the male scientist. This scientist gets accidentally shot to death by Lieutenant Robert Akers and 2 other soldiers with multiple assault rifles. The tragedy is that he was placed in a nearby cabinet to hide him. When Dr. K's soldiers, led by Akers, began firing, they thought it was Hopper behind those doors. They didn't realize it was their poor, unconscious colleague. They lit that cabinet up and the body fell out. Speaking of Lieutenant Robert Akers, the 5th season strongly suggests that he meets his end here as well. Although he survived his initial run-in with Eleven and Hopper, which resulted in Elle sifting around in his mind for information, he made the mistake of going back for more. He returned to the lab and alerted Dr. K of their presence, bringing down the heat. However, upon leading a group of soldiers into the lab itself to open fire on Hopper, he is seemingly caught in Hopper's return fire. The show doesn't make it 100% explicitly clear in a close-up whether he lives or dies in that split second, but he goes down hard when Hopper opens fire on all of them and then punches him later, knocking him out. He also doesn't resurface after Eleven is left alone in the lab for a long period of time, suggesting that he did indeed die in the crossfire. We also have 2 male soldiers who are shot to death by Hopper with an assault rifle during this escape sequence because, let's face it, Hopper in survival mode is absolutely terrifying. He is a one-man army when he needs to be, and he cuts through those soldiers with precise, lethal efficiency. The Demogorgons in this sequence are also doing an absolute number on the military personnel. The writers really wanted to show us that conventional military might is nothing compared to the Upside Down. We have 1 soldier whose head is crushed by a Demogorgon with its feet. Then there are 2 soldiers slashed to death by a Demogorgon with its claws. These things are razor sharp, and they cut through body armor and flesh like it isn't even there. Another soldier suffers a horrific fate where his back is broken by a Demogorgon after being thrown by it at an armored car. The impact alone is enough to kill him, emphasizing the superhuman strength of these monsters. They are using blunt force trauma that shatters bones. Another soldier is slashed to death in the melee, and then there is 1 killed in an unspecified manner off-screen, probably dragged into the darkness, and another shredded into pieces by a Demogorgon off-camera. The pieces, however, are likely what's left of him, scattered across the battlefield. Then, if that wasn't enough, you have a group of 10 male soldiers who are slashed to death by 3 Demogorgons working in a pack. It is a slaughter. And to top it all off, we later see a massive group of 41 male soldiers who are slashed to death by 3 Demogorgons off-screen. We don't see the deaths happen live, but their bodies are shown later, piled up or scattered, which really sets the scale of how outmatched the military is against the hive mind. 41 soldiers. That is an entire platoon wiped out by just 3 creatures. It effectively establishes that guns are not the answer here. We also have to talk about the deaths caused by Henry Creel, aka Vecna, because his kills are always more personal, more psychological, and somehow more disturbing than the animalistic violence of the Demogorgons. There are 3 male soldiers killed by Henry in an unspecified manner with his telekinetic powers. He likely just snapped them or stopped their hearts, tossing them aside like toys. Then there is 1 soldier who gets impaled through the chest by Henry with his arm vines. This is a signature move for him, using the environment of his own body to pierce through his enemies. It is gross and it is fatal. Another soldier gets tossed over a ledge by Henry, falling to his death in the dark depths of the dimension. And then we have the burned soldiers who try to fight fire with fire but fail miserably. 1 burned soldier is blown up in an explosion caused by Henry with a flamethrower. Henry basically turns their own weapons against them, using his telekinesis to redirect the flames or explode the tanks. 4 others meet the same fate, consumed by the very fire they tried to use to sanitize the Upside Down. 5 more soldiers are blown up by Henry with 2 grenades. He catches the grenades' pins in midair with his mind while they are still on the soldiers' belts and sends the soldiers crashing into the nearby fuel tank, causing it to explode. It is effortless for him. Then there is the debatable death of Lieutenant Colonel Jack Sullivan. This guy has been a thorn in everyone's side for so long. He is burned from an explosion caused by Henry. Sullivan leads the charge as the soldiers attempt to hold back the invaders from the Upside Down, and to his credit, he does hold his own against the raging Demogorgons for a bit. However, he is caught in a blast when Vecna manages to reverse a wall of fire meant for him. The blowback results in the Colonel himself catching on fire and screaming in agony. It is a horrific way to go. It is unclear if he lives or dies right in that second, but considering the show spends the next few moments on Vecna's confrontation with Will and the roaring stops, it is a safe bet that he might not have made it. After all, Dr. K is the show's new human threat now, so logically, Sullivan's narrative purpose might be over. If he is dead, he died screaming. consumed by the arrogance that led him to believe he could control or defeat this power with guns and bombs. Another soldier gets a particularly nasty end when he is stabbed through the back of the head by Henry with his finger vines. It is quick, silent, and brutal. But it isn't just humans dying, and honestly, seeing the monsters go down is the only thing that brings a little satisfaction in all this horror. The monsters take some hits too. We see 3 Demogorgons get their limbs and necks snapped by Will Byers using his telekinetic link. This is a huge moment. It is a character evolution. It shows Will leveling up and using his connection to the hive mind as a weapon against it. He snaps their necks with his mind, turning their own biology against them. It is a death for the monsters, but a rebirth for Will as a dominant character. And now Chapter 5. Shock Jock really opened up on what happened to Kaylee's gang, and honestly, it was way more brutal than I think any of us were expecting. Axel getting that sniper headshot on the orders of Dr. K was genuinely shocking in that flashback. And then we find out that Dottie, Funshine, and Mick were all killed off-screen by those same soldiers. That throat-slitting and double stabbing of the Wolfpack scientist when they think she is dead shows us a Kali we haven't really seen before. Yes, she was always willing to use her powers to hurt people, but there's something so visceral and personal about using a scalpel. She wanted those deaths to hurt, and I think that tells us everything about where her character arc was heading. She also shoots an unnamed male Wolfpack soldier in the head with a pistol, shown in a flashback. But perhaps the most disturbing discovery involves the unnamed pregnant women, at least 6 of them, who died after receiving blood transfusions of Kali's blood because of Dr. K's experiments. Chapter 6, Camazotz, takes us back to Henry's origin story in the most visceral way possible. We see an unnamed scientist getting struck at least 6 times on the head with a rock by young Henry Creel. The hospital siege is where things really start escalating. Soldiers Wright and King shoot at demodogs as Vecna sends them to kill Max, who is still in her coma. Wright has his head mauled by a demodog. King has his head and body mauled by a demodog. These deaths happen quickly and brutally. But Karen Wheeler getting to blow up 3 of those demodogs with a gas canister is honestly one of the most satisfying moments in the entire season. She hears Robin's call over the hospital intercom, gets out of her hospital bed despite her injuries, and places an oxygen tank in an industrial dryer to absolutely obliterate those monsters. Chapter 7 is essentially a war zone from start to finish. 4 unnamed male Wolfpack soldiers get shot to death by Jim Hopper with an assault rifle as they reach the main base. Nancy fires her gun through a hole in the truck roof against Kay and her men, taking out 3 more unnamed Wolfpack soldiers. But Chapter 8 is where everything goes completely off the rails in the best possible way. 6 more unnamed male Wolfpack soldiers get shot to death by Hopper. Then we get the confrontation with Akers, who threatens to kill Kaylee unless Hopper tells him where 11 is. Callie signals Hopper not to tell though, and both of them are willing to die to protect Elle. Before Akers can pull the trigger, Murray pops a grenade and throws it into the rotors of the chopper. 3 unnamed male Wolfpack soldiers were blown up by Murray with the C4 explosive, and then 11 arrived, utterly destroys the remaining soldiers. 7 unnamed male Wolfpack soldiers have their necks snapped by 11 using her telekinetic powers. Then she forces Akers to shoot himself in the head, but we discover that the single shot Akers fired went into Kallie's stomach. 11 pleads with her to pull through, but Kaylee is at peace with this, and she dies. 11's assault on the massive Mind Flayer is one of the coolest scenes in all of Stranger Things. She leaps into the air, tears a hole in its chest, and yanks Vecna down from his hanging perch. Nancy volunteers as bait during the final battle, firing on the monster as the Mind Flayer corners her, biting through solid rock to get to her. But the rest of the Abyss party comes to the rescue with flamethrowers and Molotov cocktails. Mike even gets to fire off his flare gun. Will tears off Vecna's arm while telling him they are not afraid of him, and 11 finishes the job of impaling him. The Mind Flayer collapses in flames and its heart shrivels up. The creature that has been haunting Hawkins since Season 1 is finally truly dead. But Vecna begins to cough up blood, revealing he is still alive. The party gathers around him to witness his final moment, and Joyce Byers finally takes out her axe. She delivers an all-time banger of a line before cutting Vecna's head off with repeated brutal swings as flashbacks to all the trauma he has caused play. And then there's 11. She slips away back into the Upside Down at the cost of her own life. Mike gets pulled into her mindscape for a tearful goodbye as she thanks him for their time together. The bomb goes off. The Upside Down collapses and everything inside is swept out into the void of space. 11 stands at the Mach Z gate while everyone screams for her in slow motion. And then 11 is gone. The Upside Down is gone. She sacrificed herself to end it all, choosing to stay on the bridge rather than risk Dr. K getting her hands on another child with powers. So what is the final death toll? We have over 100 military personnel killed by Demogorgons, Vecna, and 11 combined. We have Kali and her entire gang massacred by the Wolfpack operation. We have the tragic deaths of at least 6 innocent pregnant women in those horrific experiments. We have Jake the Snake. We have both the Mind Flayer and Vecna finally permanently destroyed after terrorizing Hawkins for years. And we have 11, the girl who started it all and ended it on her own terms. A new intro replaced this line from Vol 1, Deathstock. So, looking at the total picture, the death toll is staggering. And if these first 4 episodes are anything to go by, no one is safe. The graveyard is getting full, and we are only halfway through.